This is Professor Homa. This is part 3. I'm going to continue our grade assignment, and we're going to work with this section over here to figure out our final grade percentages. We're going to add up the total points first and then come up with percentages. So there's a couple things we're going to have to do, and this is actually number 7 and then number 8 on our grades sheet instructions that we're working on. So we have our total points that we figured out last time. We're going to add up these, which will be fairly simple to do. I could just click on this cell of student 1 and auto sum, and then just hit return, because I could see that it's summing up all the values before it. So I'll hit return and it comes up with 340, which is less than 350. It's probably about right. And then what I could do is I could copy this, or I could drag this down, and that'll do the same thing. That little stretch will actually stretch those numbers. So you could have copied and pasted, and just to check that it's okay, look, you can see that I have a formula here, B6 through Q6. I can see this is B6 through Q6. This should be B7 through Q7, so you can double check it if you're not sure if it worked. And there I see that all my values are correct. So these totals should all be correct out of 350. Now what we do have to figure out is a percentage, because that's how we get our grade. Okay, now to get our grade is we're gonna use our total student points, which is this one, divided by, and we use a slash, divided by this one. Use that, we'll figure out a percentage. So let's do that. I'm going to go to my percentage cell right next to student 1, and I'm going to type a formula. I'm going to use equals sum, and then in parentheses, just like our other formulas were, I'm going to type this cell reference. I'm not going to use a number. I'm not going to use 340 divided by 350, because if those numbers change, the percentage will be wrong. So I want to use the cell references. So I'm going to use R5 divided by R3. Those are the cells that we're dealing with here. So I'm going to say R5, and I'll use a slash divided by R3. And I'll end my parentheses, and I'll hit return. And a couple things, and I'll just see if it looks okay. My percentage is 1. Now that doesn't sound like a good percentage, but remember, we need to format these cells because they may not be showing in a percentage. They may be showing an actual number, so it's probably rounding off right now is what's happening. So remember up here, this area where you can format your numbers, we're going to format it as a percentage. So I might as well highlight all of these because we know they're all going to be percentages, and I'm going to go and make this a percentage just by clicking this. And we get those two number signs, which remember from class, it just means there's not enough room. So if I put my cursor between the S and the T and just spread this out a little bit, I'll give it a little more room for the percentage, and there I see it's 97. I can bring it in a little closer. If there's anybody who has 100%, I'll leave a little more room. So here's my 97%, and all these others should be formatted the same way with percentages when I do it. Okay, now here's the little trick that makes this a little more challenging, is that if I just copy this, and I'll just do a Control-C, and go to the next one and do a Control-V, I'm not getting a value in there. Matter of fact, if I click on here, my formula is R6 divided by R4. So R6, which is the right one, divided by R4. There's nothing in R4. That's why there's nothing here. See, it's looking for the same place where the values were in the previous one. So we have to do a little trick here to make sure that it's always dividing by this value. We don't want it to divide by what's next to it. We always want it to divide by one value. So to do that, in this one here, I'm just going to change, remember it should be R3. Now instead of changing every single one to R3, which would be kind of a pain to do this every time, if we put a number sign, this makes it absolute. If we put a number sign in front of the R and in front of the 3 up in my formula bar, this will lock it in and makes it absolute, meaning it'll always be R3. It won't, even when you copy and paste it, it won't take like the neighboring cell. It'll always make it R3. So that number sign makes it absolute. So I'm going to hit return, and you can see it's 85%. Now if I copy this now and do a Control-C and go to the next cell and do a Control-V, you can see I'm getting 90%. That kind of makes some sense. So we could do the same thing here. I could even stretch this out and apply all those percentages here. And I want to make sure I do that for this one too. I'm going to put a number sign in front of those. So that's putting an absolute, making that an absolute value so that all of these actually divide by this number or that cell, not that number, that cell. That's important. So if anything changes, it's relative.